Hello and welcome back. Today we are going to talk about our opportunities. You see, we as a group find ourselves at an opportune moment in history. History has granted us an opportunity that no other generation in recorded human history has ever had. We are a country of a young, energetic, and knowledgeable group, and we are in possession of the most advanced technologies ever accumulated by man. To add on to that, we find ourselves in a society that has not been organized in any meaningful way. The men and women who have been in charge of our society have been so incompetent in their job that they have created zero infrastructure. They have not moved the needle from when they inherited our nation to where we are today. But in some stroke of luck, their incompetence is a blessing in some way to us. Now, it would have been much preferable had these men and women actually gone out and created a society that worked for us, created an infrastructure that was able to accommodate all of us with all our needs and all our goals, expectations. A country that provides us with a platform for each and every one of us to express themselves. But they did not. But with that decision, they have handed us a clean slate. We have the opportunity to build the country we want from the ground up. There is nothing to improve. There is nothing to work around. So this is how I see it. We are a young, highly capable generation living in a disorganized society that has yet to develop a structure that serves our needs. The infrastructure that exists in this country is mostly a relic of the colonial exploitation period. And all the improvements that have been made by the men and women who have been in charge of our country since then have all been directed towards ensuring that this infrastructure that was meant to exploit us does so more efficiently. Our country's foundational principle is still the same. It is meant to serve the interest of foreigners. At the beginning, it was meant to serve the interest of settlers. When the men and women who were planning for this country sat down, they did not stop at any point to think, how does this or that policy impact the local person, what they called the native? When independence came, no one went back to change that foundational principle. They just continued. And so our entire infrastructure, even when we have had men and women who look like us, talked like us, and elected by us in offices, the mechanism of our state still revolves around serving every person's interest but our own. It serves the interest of Europeans, it serves the interest of foreign conglomerates, serves the interest of Asians, and now it's even serving the interest of the Chinese. And in that murky world, the elites of our society, an elite who got there by either being traitors during colonialism or who got there by looting our public resources, have found a way to also benefit from that system. That is why the men and women in power continue to fight to keep this system in place. But we as a generation must unite and reject this status quo. And yes, we might disagree on how we improve on our nation or we make our country better. But one thing is clear. The men and women in charge of our society must go, and they must all go. But before we go further, I would like us to take a moment and define our movement and generation. It is said that the first step towards solving a problem is admitting that one has a problem. And we, the people of this continent, have an identity problem. I say this to make the point that I am opposed to the idea that we have chosen to assume foreign generational classification and now we wear them as our own. We have borrowed terms like millennials, Gen Zs, Gen Xers, and appropriated them to ourselves, even though they are rooted in Western history, not ours. Please allow me to point out how our adopting of this format is problematic and also present an alternative that I think we should be using. Generational classification is a 20th century invention, and it is usually based on shared experiences that shape a people's worldview. Here is a quick overview. The group we call baby boomers are supposed to represent men and women born between 1946 and 1964. And here is explanation for that. They are called baby boomers because after the end of the Second World War, there was a spike in birth rates in both Europe and the United States. And because of this rise in birth rates, the children were dubbed baby boomers because of the post-war baby boom. And then we come down to the Gen Xers. These are the people born between 1965 and 1980. This is the definition they have for that generation. This generation grew up in a period of shifting societal norms, characterized by the end of the Cold War and the rise of personal computing and internet. Their experiences are supposed to have been shaped by economic changes and a more progressive social movement, again, especially in the United States and Europe. Then came what is supposed to be my generation, the millennials. They are also called Generation Y. This group is supposed to have grown up during the digital revolution. They saw the birth of social media and smartphones. And the most defining event of this generation is supposed to be the 9/11 attack on the Americans and a changing or a globalizing world. And now we come to the generation that has sparked the need for this debate. The Zoomers, or Generation Z. This generation is said to have been born into a fully digital world, with technologies like smartphone and social media deeply ingrained in their lives. The defining events of their life is supposed to be climate change movement and the COVID-19 pandemic. And then we have the last generation, which are the Generation Alpha, those born after 2013 to date. This young generation, their defining principle is that they were born entirely in the 21st century and they are supposedly growing up with artificial intelligence, virtual reality, and increasing technological advancement. These classifications, yes, they tell a true story of what has been happening. But these classifications largely originate from Western societies, especially the United States. But because of their influence, especially through media, those generational classifications have been appropriated to the entire world. But going through them, it is obvious that these classifications have nothing to do with us or our lived reality. Not a single group among us, be it baby boomers, Gen Xers, millennials, Gen Zs, Gen Alphas, not a single group among us can claim to have been impacted by the events that define these generations. And that is why I believe we ought to stop using them and instead come up with classifications that are more befitting to our reality. Now, I am not going to impose that on anyone, but if we were to redo the generations, this would be my suggestion for a better alternative. We are also going to start in the 20th century. The most defining event of the 20th century for us as the people of Kenya would be breaking away from the shackles of colonialism. So for me, the men and women who are aware, meaning the men and women who are 80 years old and above. By the time we got our independence, would make up our independence generation. Again, the generation classification take 15 years on average to shift from one group to the other. But if you were to remain with the definition that a group becomes a generation when they share an experience together that shapes their lives, then I believe 15 years is not enough to actually accommodate a generation. So I would suggest 30 years. The amount of time it requires for a person to grow up, choose a path in life, and decide what they want to do with their lives. And following that structure, after the independence generation, who would be people born before 1955, the people in this country born between 1956 and 1985 would make up the first free generation. These were a group of Africans who never fought colonialism, never met colonialism. They are men and women who were born in a free Kenya. They went to school in a free Kenya where they were governed by their brothers, their sisters, their uncles, their aunts. Then this group became of age in the same free Kenya. And today, this group largely controls our society. They make up our political class. They make up our employer class in the private sector. They hold the levers of control in our society. People born between 1985 and 2015, in my view, would make up the second free generation. Mostly these are the children and grandchildren of the members of the first free generation. And they would represent those among us who are advocating for change, because we have grown up under a set of rules and guidelines that was set by the first group. And in our adulthood, we have realized that there was no plan for the path we were given. The men and women in charge of our country today had not planned for our arrival. They had not created an infrastructure or an environment that would allow us to live the lives that we would want to, or lives that allow us to be productive and have meaningful experiences. Envisioning the country we desire will require a robust competition of ideas. We must not be afraid to imagine or to dream or to expand the limits or the bounds of what we think is possible. But this is not how our political elite see things. Their primary focus is on finding more efficient ways of extracting resources from us in the name of taxes. But here is the issue. We live in a country where we pay taxes, and then we are required to fund our own education from our pockets. We pay taxes, but when we get sick, we are required to dig deeper in our pockets so that we can acquire health care. And even then, those efforts might not be enough. We all pay taxes, and yet we have an infrastructure that has been curated to advance the interest of a very small part of our society. Look at our roads. Almost all of them do not have footpaths. And yet we live in a country where most of us walk from point A to point B. And there is a chance that a significant majority of us will never own cars. But somehow when we are imagining our roads are for cars. People, it does not matter. They will find a place they will use. Our public schools deliver an inadequate education, yet private schools remain out of reach for most families. Meanwhile, our government offices, whose primary obligation is to deliver services, are more interested in governing us or regulating our behaviors and actions than they are interested in delivering services. Despite all of this, we remain an overtaxed, underemployed, underpaid, and underserved society. At this point, it is worth asking, What exactly does this country do for us? We can no longer continue to ignore the issues that affect our lives. Our indifference is costing us a lot. It is costing us valuable opportunities. It is preventing us from living fully and freely. It is a new world. The world we live in presents us with opportunities for people to define the lives they want to live. And if they are committed to it, be able to chase the desires of their heart or whatever they think their contribution to the world ought to be. But we do not have that opportunity. We have not created an infrastructure that allows us that freedom. Our indifference is also costing us our joy. If we were to be sincere with ourselves, a significant chunk of us do not live fulfilling lives. People are not happy. People are either angry or they are turning their pain and anger in alcohol and drugs and whatever makes people forget, or just burying themselves in work. But this is not how we are supposed to live our lives. Our indifference to the way we are governed is also costing us deserved life experiences. It is 2025. The possibilities of the things one is able to do are limitless. But our society has not created an infrastructure that is able to accommodate that. Lastly, and this is with regards to our progression in life, our indifference is costing us relationships and marriages. People take marriages as a social obligation, and to a large extent it's a social obligation. But at its core, marriage is an economic contract. Marriages do not work where people do not have a means to provide for themselves. And our society has not provided us with a means to provide for ourselves. And as a result, more and more people in our generation, what I have termed the second free generation, or if you still want to stick with the foreign classifications, the millennials and the zoomers, this group is continuing to postpone this social obligation, if I may term it that way, because most people lack the financial muscle that is supposed to be an integral part of people making this step. Unfortunately, our silence and inaction towards changing our political reality or changing our society has been misinterpreted as consent for the status quo. We do not consent to this. We must begin serious deliberations about the future we want for ourselves as a country. We can no longer afford to be indifferent to the manner in which our society is being governed. It is upon us to envision the country we want to create. But we must be very clear about the goals of what we want to do and courageous enough to be able to work towards achieving them. And here is where the good fortunes of history and time smile upon us. Technology is our greatest ally. We now have the tools, knowledge, and chance to create the country we want. When I say we need to imagine the country we want, it is no longer just imagining. We have the power and the ability to also make that future happen. This is what I mean. In 2025, we have an accumulation of all the technologies ever invented by man to date. There is no technology that has ever existed that we do not have access to today. There is no knowledge that has been accumulated by man that we do not have access to today. Take it this way. 150 years ago, which is what they call the Industrial Revolution, when the Europeans were beginning to imagine and build their societies, they did not have anywhere close to what we have in terms of technology and ideas and information. When the Asians, 60 years, 50 years ago, were laying the foundation for the countries they wanted to build, they did not have anywhere close to the technologies and the ideas we have today. And this is what I mean by the fortunes of time and history smiling upon us. If 2025 is the year from which we decide that we are tired with the mediocrity, that we are tired with having to live lives that are less adequate or less fulfilling, or that do not provide us with an opportunity to express ourselves fully, then our starting point is the best that any group in human history has ever had. We do not have to reinvent the wheel. We know what has worked in different societies and what have not worked. We do not have to invent anything. We can just look at what is happening and implement that for ourselves. We can go around and cherry pick from every society, cherry pick the parts of them that worked, and whatever we find that did not work, we can leave. And we go to the next society and we pick the parts of that society that has worked. And if we bring all that together, then we get to create the society we want. And here is where the generational classifications hold strategic importance. Some statistics. According to our population data, the group I have designated as the second free generation, or again, the millennials plus the Zoomers. This group makes up a significant chunk of our population. It is estimated that by the end of this year, there will be 57.5 million Kenyans. By 2027, that number is estimated to grow between 58 and 60 million. With a median age of around 20 years and a youth-dominated population, approximately 50 to 55% of the population is expected to be 18 years and above in the year 2027. This means there will be an estimated 29 to 33 million voters. Again, the generational classifications. In that group, the people born before 1985 make up 25%, or between 6 and 8 million voters. The rest, the 75 to 80%, or 21 to 25 million voters, all those people belong in the second free generation. So if these estimates hold, and we decide to act in a manner that advances our interest, there will be nothing to stop us from creating the country we want. And this brings me to our next point of discussion. I do not want us to get lost about what we are doing here. The core purpose of our conversation, my motivation for doing this work, and our most critical collective need is to take charge of our reality. The political system of our country is the institution that has the most influence or impact on our lives. And that, I believe, should be the focus of our attention. We cannot allow others to continue making decisions that shape our lives without our input. I have just indicated to you that just with the population we have today, those of us, either today or in 2027, who are between 18 years and 40 years, which is a fair group because these are people who have grown up and found a country that has been created in a manner that does not enhance their abilities. It does not allow them to express themselves. Our most important thing is to ensure that when the next discussion about our country is being had, we get to have that discussion. 80% of us, we can no longer continue to take the tokens we are told, youth fund or 1/3 of appointments. All those gimmicks and nonsense should not apply. In this country, people 18 years and above vote. And my proposition is, if the people between 18 and 40 make up 80% of the population, then those are the only people who need to be at the table when discussing how our resources are distributed or how we are governed. For a very long time, the other group has been in charge, but they make up 20%. So if 20% are adequate enough to make decisions that impact 100% of the population, then there should be no question about 18% holding the same power. In her book, Chimamanda Ngozi makes the following point, and this one I'll read. The real tragedy of the post-colonial world is not that the majority of the people had no say in whether they wanted the new world. Rather, it was that the majority have not been given the tools to navigate this world. And I believe this is what has ailed us as a group. And here by a group I mean the African. We were introduced into a world that was moving at a pace way faster than what our ancestors were used to. But no one went back and provided the tools that would have allowed us to navigate this very complex world. But thanks to the advances in information and communication technology, we have a chance to take some of that initiative. Today, we have the means to connect and engage in meaningful discussions from all corners of this country. The tools we need to do this are accessible. And the best part about it is the men and women in our society who would have a problem with the young people of this generation having a separate discussion about their interest, about how they believe their country should be organized. All those people who would have a problem with such a discussion do not have control over these items. They access them the same way we access them. And so, essentially, the opinion does not have to matter. We can ignore every person or every group outside of our constituent and have a discussion about the future we want for ourselves. And this is why I'm actually choosing this approach. For far too long, the political class have had a monopoly of ideas in defining what is important to us and what is not important. And through time, especially given how most of them get to those positions, they have been conflicting their interest with our interests. The sad thing is that their interest is their greed. They have an unreasonable need to accumulate resources. That is not our need. They have an unreasonable need to accumulate our resources. And they have decided that our public coffers, money that is taken from us mostly without our consent, and even with our consent, that is taken to do certain things, these men and women have decided these resources is what they are going to use to feed their greed. That is not our interest. You cannot take a percentage of my earning and tell me it's supposed to provide service A, B, C. And then, once you already have the funds on your side, take the money to do whatever you want. Buy yourselves vehicles, buy yourselves land, make yourself wealthy, go travel the world, do whatever nonsense our political elites do. Well, I, the person who worked for that resource, do not get those privileges. If you are not going to do what you were supposed to do with the money, then it would have been better not to take it in the first place. But that is not the discussion we have, because for some weird reason the government has a right to tax us. Services are an option. And this is where we must start changing that. We must start bringing a conversation where our interests are primary, where our needs are what matters. That when people engage in public discourse, we are not discussing the individual needs of some people from this group or that group. We are discussing our underlying interest. All of us as a group, what is it that we need? What are our bare minimums? The freedom we now have because of the advances in technology will allow us to have conversations without interference. We get to actually talk for the first time. This is something previous generations did not have. They did not have the means to communicate, at least among themselves, in a manner where each and every person or each and every group got to have their opinion weighed against the opinions of others. But we have this power. We are the first generation to have this power. And it is something we must fully embrace and leverage. The ability to connect, exchange ideas, and collaborate across vast distances has the ability to transform the way we build our future. And if that does not convince you, allow me to restate our reality or how we got here. Our shared citizenship was born out of exploitation and conquest. And even in the post-colonial era, there has been very little that has been done to bring us together as a people. The definitions we have for each other, the understanding, I as a Kikuyu, you as a Luo, you as a Kamba, you as a Rendile, you as a Maasai, you as a Kalenjin, whichever group you come from. That description you hold, that description is the description that was inscribed by the white man in their effort to understand us. There has been no serious push for us to understand each other, because we are told that we share a destiny, we share a future. But it is very difficult to share a future and a destiny with a person you actually do not know. What keeps us united, and this is the sad thing, is our commitment to maintain an exploitative system that continues to take from us. We fight the most for our politicians, even when they never fight for us. We fight each other instead of fighting for one another. And this is the reality we live in. My purpose here is to invite all of us to renegotiate the social contract. Yes, we live in this geographical region called Kenya. Yes, we did not have any input in bringing it together, but we are here now. We cannot go back. This is our reality. So how do we work together from now? How do we get to determine what is important to all of us? And what is it that we agree, all of us agree, that is the bare minimum that all of us should have access to? What are those bare minimums that we are going to guarantee ourselves as Kenyans so that we have the best chance of living the lives we want? Our society needs to create conditions that allow us to live our best lives, which in turn would elevate the overall standard of living for us all. And this is why I'm here. I am inviting you to join me in this conversation of a prosperous Kenya. I want us to create a country where we can all be proud of. A country that works for all of us. And I will use this platform to outline how we can utilize the tools at our disposal to shape a society ready for the 22nd century. This has been your host, Wanga. I'll see you next time. Thank you.